Hey guys, it's Sam with The Blind Life. Got a special video for you today. I'm doing an interview with Mr. Jeremy Smith. He is a licensed professional clinical counselor, and one awesome thing is that he's visually impaired. Jeremy, thank you very much for sitting with me and chatting for a little while.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Yeah, mind talking about your vision impairment?
Nope, I'm happy to. So I think when I was 10 years old, started having trouble seeing the board, went to lots of specialists, did what people typically do, and it just got worse really quickly. Now, the reality is I spent 30 years of my life not really knowing what condition I had. It's only in the last 6 months to a year that I did genetic testing, and now they think I have Leber's congenital amaurosis.
Well, then let's get into you're a clinical...
You can say clinical counselor or therapist. Okay. I mean, it's all sort of a general term, yeah.
Okay. And so why did you choose to go into that profession?
Well, I'll try to keep this brief, but when I was growing up, I didn't have anybody give me any sort of guidance about what a visually impaired kid should think about doing as a career track. Just absolutely zero guidance about that, which I think was to my detriment, ultimately. But you know, I made good grades. I cared about school. I enjoy learning. To this day, I'm always teaching myself something new because I like learning. I like reading. I like studying. So I went to college, started taking some sociology, some psychology classes, and it worked for me. I felt like I was interested in why human beings do the things they do. So for me, honestly, it was just luck that I ended up taking classes and finding something that made sense to me, that I enjoyed doing, and had a career track that I could do despite being visually impaired. I used some lots of assistive technology, like most of us who have low vision. There's electronic health records. That's basically how I keep notes on my clients. That's all through a website that I access on my tablet. So record keeping is really the only kind of paperwork related thing I have to do. Otherwise, I sit and I talk with people and I do what we would call case conceptualization. You know, what's happening for this person? How can I intervene? How can I be helpful? And you don't have to see very well to do that.
Right. So in your practice here, do you see mostly visually impaired people, or do you... Anybody's welcome?
Yeah, most of my clients are not people with disabilities. I get referrals from different sources. Some come from local vocational rehabilitation offices, which is great because I do really enjoy working with people with disabilities. I know what it's like to sort of build a life with those challenges. And so other folks who are struggling with that, it's rewarding to me to be able to help those folks. But it's not the majority of my practice. If I could build that, that'd be great. But
Have you ever experienced someone comes in here and they're like, oh, you're blind. Maybe we'll go try someone else. Or I don't know, anything negative? Any negative reactions?
You know what? I think... Really, it's an advantage in my field, to be quite honest, because when people come in, the first thing I tell them is, hey, I'm legally blind. If I don't make eye contact with you, it's not because I'm not listening to you. I do a spiel up front.
Yeah.
And I think what that does for me, it allows me to early on really build rapport with people, because I'm telling you something that makes me vulnerable. And that's what people are here to do with me. You know, they're talking about things that are really difficult for them, like incredible emotional trauma, and they have to open up. So if I do that first, it sort of, it cracks the door open so that they can walk through and do that same thing, make themselves vulnerable and talk to me about really difficult things.
Yeah, so really it's a benefit.
I think so.
It helps out in the long run.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I get a lot of people through the channel, comments, Facebook, a lot of people asking what kind of jobs are out there for the visually impaired.
Well, I think you have to find something that works for you. It just sucks going to work when you don't enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for everybody to figure that out. What speaks to your soul, what gets you excited about being part of the world. And then, like you said, just being visually impaired, this is fundamental. You have to figure out how to adapt, how to work around things. You got to be resourceful and creative and innovative. You got to be realistic, and you probably need to check with people if you're 15 and trying to figure out what you're going to do. Float these ideas to some other folks. Like, does it make sense for me to want to be a computer programmer?
Right.
I think absolutely. It probably. I'm no good at that, and I would be a terrible computer programmer.
Yeah.
But for somebody else with sight loss, I think it's totally realistic.
Yeah, and put some thought into it, like you said, plan it out, because you can't just jump into a job or a career and be like, oh, I'll figure out the blind part later, after I get into it, or even just going for a job at a grocery store or something like that, oh, I'll figure it out.
Do some legwork.
Yeah.
Ask some questions of people who are in that field, and figure out. But persistence and grit, that'll take you a long way.
Oh yeah. My work, I see a lot of people with macular degeneration. They're in their 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and they're losing their sight, and they're struggling. They're having a really tough time, and it kills me. I hate it. It really tugs at the heartstrings.
Yeah.
Would you recommend someone come talk to someone like yourself about that?
Yeah, absolutely. When you lose something as vital as your vision, there's a grieving process, right? Like, you are not what you once were, because this part of you is going away. And there's a lot of emotion in that needs to be dealt with in some way. I mean, this is true for every issue that anybody faces at any point in their lives. If you don't deal with what's happening, the emotional part of what's happening, I mean, that's going to just continue to plague you. And typically those things, they don't just get better on their own. They fester, and they become a problem that branches out and touches every part of your life, whereas it could be a lot more consolidated. There's no way to just make this better and make it go away and life is beautiful again. Mm-hmm. There's going to be stuff you gotta deal with, but it's perseverance. Mm-hmm. It's that desire and that wanting to keep living for these other things. I mean, people with sight loss can have very rewarding and fulfilling lives, but you've got to want to make that happen, and you got to do the work. It really is work to adjust and adapt to this new version of you, but that new version doesn't have to be less than what the previous version was. It's just different.
Right.
So, get in touch with people who know what you're going through, because there's a lot to be learned from those people. And then you come talk to me, because that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help you process all that stuff that's going through your head, and you're not by yourself. You're not alone in this. We're all, there's lots of us who are living this same process. So let somebody give you a hand.
Yeah, and like you said, I think attitude has a lot to do with it. But also keep in mind that it's probably not going to come right away. There, like you said, there's that grieving process, then mourning. You've lost something, so it's going to take some time. But if you have a positive attitude, even after some time of dealing with it, that's gonna come in very handy, and it's gonna make it much easier. Like Jeremy said, going and being around other people like yourself, or with vision loss, helps tremendously. So what would you say to parents? Advice for parents who maybe their kid just got diagnosed, or they just had a kid, and it's clear that this baby or toddler has vision impairment. Yeah. What kind of advice would you give?
Well, I think those parents are probably going to experience a similar sort of what we would call a chronic grief sort of thing, because, and there's a period of normalization for parents who have a kid who has been recently diagnosed, or they just had the child and it was born maybe blind or whatever. It's going to take a while for them to come to terms with what the reality for their kid's going to be. And so the parents themselves probably need to talk to somebody and just process some of their own feelings. But my thing is, and this comes a lot from my own personal experience. You know, I was 10 years old, and I can remember vividly this teacher telling me I couldn't read a test one day. And she pulls me, and I was really upset about this because I cared about my grades. I was a good student. I was upset. I couldn't do this test because it was a really bad copy.
Oh, yeah.
And so she pulls me out of the classroom into the hallway and tells me, I didn't know you were blind. And it's the first time anybody had ever used that word to describe me. And so, you know, that was a traumatic moment in my childhood. So what I would say to parents is you have to talk to that kid about what condition they have. You have to make that normal for them. Because the outside world is not going to make it normal for them. They are going to stand out, and there's no way for them to hide that. So you have to help them accept the facts of what their life is. We can't hide from what reality is. That's a lot of the reason that I see people is people have spent their lives hiding from what is reality. So the kid has to come to terms with that and has to be okay with it. Because if they're not, that's what splits people in two. If you are something that you cannot erase, but you don't want to be that, you know, you're going to be at odds with yourself for your entire life. So helping a kid just accept who they are and be okay with that and build some structure for what they're going to be down the road and help them brainstorm about what their life's going to be despite their challenges. Like, that's good parenting.
Yeah, and we were talking about this earlier, that, and like I said, helping them figure out what's out there for them and what they might be able to do when they get older. That you think that's very important.
I think it's absolutely crucial, because if you don't, the kid's left to their own devices to figure that out. And man, that's a big question to be answering when you've already got, you know, challenges you're dealing with.
Were your parents like that? Were they good about being honest with you about your vision impairment?
Man, yeah, my parents are great people, but I don't think they were prepared for what it was like to have a kid with the issues I had. And no, I mean, we never talked about my vision.
I have a friend who, her parents just swept it under the rug. They didn't, like, don't tell anybody, you know, pretend to be sighted and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
And my parents were completely opposite. My parents were totally fine, you know, this is the way it is, and I think that helps. And they were like, you know, what kind of help can we get in school? I needed large print and all that much earlier, and I was using a CCTV in middle school. Okay. But they were always like, you know, I guess not, don't be ashamed of it.
Well, I think what you said there is exactly right. I mean, I don't know you well, Sam, but you seem like a well-adjusted person. And being a mental health professional, I can tell you, I very seldom meet people who are well-adjusted people. The majority of us are not. Yeah. And so I think, you know, for your friend whose parents swept it under the rug, he or she had the same experience I had, where you grow up feeling like this thing is not something you're supposed to talk about. And you should be embarrassed by the fact that you can't see well. You should be ashamed of the fact that, I mean, when we're kids, we don't know how to process this information correctly or, you know, in a healthy way. So when parents sweep something under the rug and parents pretend something isn't true, we think it's bad and it should be hidden. And the consequences are not for the parents in that situation. The consequences, the negative consequences, are for the kid growing up and feeling that way about themselves. And that's bad parenting. That's just, I'm not normally a black and white kind of guy, or good and bad, but that's bad parenting. Yeah. You're not doing your job. Sorry. You know, I hope any sort of stigma that has ever existed around counseling is going away, because, I mean, whether you're visually impaired or not, man, life is really difficult for a lot of us. There's just so many things that come up, and we're often not emotionally equipped or prepared, or we're figuring things out for ourselves. And I just think it's so valuable to go to somebody bounce some ideas off of him and try to get a second opinion on, this is the way I think and feel about things. And it's really not working for me. So how can I? That's really what we do. Ideally, I'm giving you some feedback, giving you some tools to use, and then you take those and do the work outside of the time we spend together, because that's where the rubber hits the road on this thing.
And I like how you said, come to you to get a second opinion, because even though we might think, oh, I'm okay, I've got my problems, I'm all right. Well, why don't we see? Let's go talk to someone else and see what they think and get a second opinion on that.
Yeah, I think we all make choices at times where we think, well, I guess I'm making the best call, but I'm not really sure.
Right.
And maybe you're continuing to be unhappy in your life despite those choices. So, that's always the question for me is it working for you? Mm-hmm. And if it's not, I think you're going to know that answer pretty quickly. Yeah. So go figure it out with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm here to do.
Well, thank you very much, Jeremy, for taking some time to talk with me about this. I think it's awesome. It's awesome information. I think a lot of people need to know and should consider. That if they need help with something, if there's any question about something's maybe not right in their life, they can come talk to someone like you. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
How can someone get a hold of you if they would like to?
So I have a website, www.counselinglexington.com. You can find a phone number there to reach me, email address, or you can check me out on Psychology Today. I have a profile there as well.
Okay, and Atlas Counseling
Lexington.com.
All one
word.
word.
Yep.
One word. Okay, great.
Yep.
And I'll have a link to that down below if you guys want to get some more information about Jeremy Smith. And thank you guys for tuning in. This is Sam and Jeremy with The Blind Life. We'll see you next time.